Great. Thank you so much, Rosemary. And I'm Cindy Jacobs. I'm the chief of the Energy Star Commercial and Industrial Branch. And good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you're joining us from. I am thrilled to have you with us for the next hour or so, and excited to present to you our proposal for an Energy Star NextGen certification for commercial and multifamily buildings in the United States. And in the next hour, you're going to hear about the proposal itself. You will learn where to go for more information and how to send in your comments, which we're really looking forward to. And I am looking forward to a Q&A session at the end. So as you heard, please enter your questions into the chat so that we can have a chance to address them today. Rosemary, I think I need the main presentation showing.
Oh, yeah, one second. Let's see. I'm just going to take presenter control back.
Okay. All right, there we go. Excellent. All right, so what I want to start with is to provide some context. Climate modelers and experts have basically reached consensus on the three interdependent pathways we need to follow in order to reach our carbon goals for 2050. And those are the three laid out here. They're not really in an order because we have to do all of these now. We have to make progress toward all of these now. But on the left, the first bars are that we need to produce our electricity using renewable sources. And you can see that bar starts out fairly high and goes down to almost zero. So what that means is we need just tremendous growth in new renewable energy development across the country. We also need to continue to push on energy efficiency and in fact ramp up our activities to increase energy efficiency. Because efficiency in and of itself is a way to reduce carbon, but also because if we don't do that, there is simply no way we can build enough renewable energy to meet the demand that will happen as we talk about the third pathway, which is electrification of end uses. So that's transportation essentially going from very, very small portion of electricity use to almost 100%. It's homes, commercial buildings, multifamily buildings, and industrial as well. So with that, what you'll see is that our Energy Star NextGen proposal is designed to turn these pathways into action for building owners. And let me just walk through some of this. We want to encourage greater energy efficiency. We want to really recognize that buildings have a role to play in the renewable energy investments that we need. And we want to reward the transition to efficient electrification. Now, I want you to notice that I didn't say we want to recognize buildings that are 100% electric. We do, and we will. But we understand that there are buildings today that can't simply make that switch, that there is a lot of investment needed and that they need help on that path to electrification. And we feel that that's where Energy Star can really play a role. Some of you may recall that about a year and a half ago, we proposed a recognition for buildings that would be a net zero carbon recognition. And what we realized is that that would require buildings be 100% electric in order to qualify. So as we thought about that, we realized that our role needed to be to move the market toward electrification. So you'll hear that as we talk about the criteria to get to that in a little bit. And then we think it's really important to try to keep it simple, and you'll see that as well, and to leverage our existing foundation of Energy Star certification and our portfolio manager tool. So the three criteria we propose reflect that. And we're going to get into what each of these means, starting with efficiency. So the first requirement is essentially Energy Star certification. And what that means is that a building must achieve a score of 75 or higher on our Energy Star 1 to 100 scale. And it must meet the criteria associated with Energy Star certification. So why is that what we chose? Well, we believe that ensures that a building will be energy efficient, and I talked about how important that is. We know that Energy Star certification is well understood in the market and accepted. In fact, there are over 40,000 buildings across the US that have achieved Energy Star certification. And inherently in the process of Energy Star certification, there's a review of the building's data, the energy data and other data, and a verification process. So we can be confident that these buildings are efficient. It also allows us to leverage the existing infrastructure we have for certification. And another nice feature here is that we can relatively easily increase the stringency of this criterion going forward if we decide that's appropriate. Right now, it's 75, as it is for Energy Star certification, but we could increase it to 80 or 85 going forward. One thing to keep in mind with this, though, is that it does restrict the eligibility to buildings that can get the Energy Star score and qualify for certification. Luckily, that is a majority of the commercial and multifamily building space. So this shows you the types of buildings that are eligible today for Energy Star certification. And as you see here, auto dealers coming soon, and convenience stores, we just launched a draft of that. We are always looking to expand as the data become available to allow us to do so. The next criterion is renewable energy. And what we hit upon here is a requirement that 30% of total energy use in the building come from renewable sources. So there's a lot to kind of unpack and talk about here. First, we want that to be flexible, so it can be on-site renewable generation, or it could be purchase of renewable energy certificates, electricity certificates. It can also be renewable fuels, or if a market develops, for renewable thermal certificates. And the reason that we want to provide this flexibility is we know that for certain buildings, maybe those in urban areas with limited roof space, it's harder to do on-site renewable generation. And really, we need to push for investment in new renewable energy development, as I've said several times, and so we don't want to restrict that. Another aspect of this is that the total amount of RECs purchased cannot exceed the amount of electricity consumed. And essentially, that means you can't trade off renewable energy from electricity for gas use in the building. This really shouldn't be an issue at the 30% level because I don't really know of any buildings that use that get 30% or less of their energy from electricity, but that's an important thing just to understand. And then another piece of this is it does not credit renewables that contribute to standard grid electricity. So what that really means is that the building owner needs to have ownership of the RECs, or the RECs need to have been retired on the building owner's behalf. Now, there are utility products that we think would probably qualify for this. That's something that we're going to be looking more at going forward and refining exactly how this would work. And we'd love your comment on that. But we think it's really important to, again, encourage new renewable energy generation. And we don't want to credit or penalize a building based on where it's located. We also know that the grid's interconnected. And so that plays a role in why we decided to do it this way. And we think it's really important as well to have a single national requirement along with that principle of keeping it simple. And we will need to build out some of the tracking, the renewable energy tracking capabilities in Portfolio Manager to support this criterion. And then finally, electrification. And the way we decided to structure the electrification criterion is as an on-site a direct, which is what we call it in Portfolio Manager, emissions limit for the building. And the reason that this is expressed as an emissions limit is because the less natural gas or other fuels, fossil fuels, combusted at the building, the lower the direct emissions will be. So this is a way to encourage electrification through that emissions limit. And it both encourages progress towards efficient electrification. It also recognizes buildings that are fully electrified because they will have zero direct emissions. Now, we realized that in order to create such a limit, we had to think about how it would play out depending on where in the country a building is located and what type of building it is. So use of natural gas or other on-site fuels are really predominantly for space heating, water heating, and cooking as well. And what that means is that in colder climates, a building will need to use more in order to meet the needs of the occupants of the building than in a warmer climate where less heating is required. Also, a multifamily building or building where people live will tend to need more as well. More showers and heating throughout 24 hours. So we realized that we needed to normalize for the climate/weather and the building type in order to make this equitable and make it work. So I'm going to actually turn it over now to my colleague, Matt Burgess, who manages our analytical work and can walk you through this criterion.
Thanks, Cindy. Hey everyone. Just wanted to do one more pitch that if you have any questions throughout, please put them in the chat and we'll try to get back to you at the end of all of this. But yeah, like Cindy was saying, our next step in kind of this process was figuring out how we can apply a direct GHG target fairly, because as Cindy said, a building's direct emissions are going to be based heavily on the heating needs of that location. Sorry. And then, so for example, somewhere it's going to be unfair to have the same direct GHGI target in the Northeast as it would be in the Southeast. So thinking about this and how to solve it, this took us back to a measurement we already use in the Energy Star score, and it's called heating degree days. And so what that is it measures the actual temperature at a specific location relative to 65 degrees, and 65 being kind of a cutoff point for where you need to either cool or heat. And the way it works is it's a count of how many degrees below 65 the average temperature is during a day. So that's kind of hard to, and then sum for the whole year. So that's a little tricky to explain. So I'll do a quick example. So say if you have January 1st, the average temperature is 50 degrees. The HDD is going to be 15 degrees because that's 15 less than 65. And then say the second day, 55 degrees is the average temperature. That's going to be 10 heating degree days. So adding those up together is 25, and you'd kind of keep going on throughout the entire year until you have an annual heating degree days, which is a pretty good measure of a building's heating needs throughout the year. So we wanted to use HDD to find a way to normalize for direct GHGI emissions. And to thinking about keeping this simple, we wanted to explore kind of the simplest way of normalizing this metric, which we thought would be putting GHGI in terms of HDD. So basically just direct GHGI per unit of HDD. And then we could use that GHGI per HDD as a factor that would allow us to create specific targets for each building. So customized targets for each building based on their experienced heating needs. And the idea here is basically just that if a building has a higher HDD, it's in a colder climate. Basically, the way that works out is that the limit, the direct GHGI target will be lower or will be higher than an area that's in a lower HDD. And so kind of to confirm that worked, we analyzed this farther, and we basically took our data set of portfolio managers certified buildings. So the top 25% performance, we took all of those buildings and we calculated a metric GHGI per HGD for each building. And we excluded all electric buildings just because those kind of have limited value here because they have no emissions. So we toss those out. So just looking at buildings that have some form of on-site fuel use. And what we looked at the median of those values. And what we see is that the median of direct GHGI, just direct GHGI, is very climate dependent based on, a colder climate has much more emissions, but that metric direct GHGI per HGD is relatively consistent across climate zones. And so these values are shown in the table. And so, for example, for office, we have a median GHGI per HGD of 0.25. And what we can do with this ratio is we can normalize for the various heating needs of a building. And so if a building's in the Northeast with a high HGD, you basically multiply that HGD value by the factor, and you come up with a direct GHGI target. And I think a really important factor of this is kind of like the simplicity of the approach. It might seem kind of complicated, but it allows us to publish this table that basically just has proposed GHGI factors for each property type in a single value. And yeah, I just wanted to point out again that, yeah, these values are the median of energy certified buildings. So that means that, they're the top 50%, the better 50% of a pool of already energy efficient buildings. And then also what Cindy noted about needing to normalize for differences in property types. So the multifamily example, that's taken care of by having, specific factors based on each property type. So you can see here the multifamily housing factor is higher than the office factor for reasons discussed. Next slide. Yeah, and so how will this work in Portfolio Manager? So thankfully, a lot simpler than everything I just explained, I think. So basically, Portfolio Manager will already have your actual HGD, your experienced heating degree days, and your GHGI factor programmed in, and it will calculate using those a building's unique NextGen direct GHGI target. So that will just be a target that appears in Portfolio Manager that you basically need to meet to achieve this NextGen status. And so Portfolio Manager will compare that target against your building's actual direct GHGI. And if your actual direct GHGI is below the target, then that means you've met the requirement. And each month, as you go in and upload new energy data, you'll see that your actual direct GHGI has changed, and you'll either be getting closer or farther from that target. And like I said, we'll publish these GHGI factors for each building type. I think now is probably a good time to point out that I think we're looking for feedback on the methodology here, like actually how, like using these GHGI factors and having a direct GHGI target. But I think open to feedback, we have these proposed factors in the table in the last slide. And I think also looking for feedback on how we, develop those numbers. And yeah, so Portfolio Manager will show monthly progress. And like Cindy already mentioned, 100% electric buildings, we're already rewarding them because they, by default, meet these requirements. And next slide, Cindy, please. Okay, and then this is an example of how the calculations work. And I think it gives a good example of basically how we're normalizing for both weather, heating degree days, heating needs, and also property type. So what we have here is columns for an office in Washington, D.C., a column for an office in New York City, and then a retail store in New York City and a retail store in Atlanta. And you can see that both offices, the first row there, NextGen direct GHGI factor, both offices have the same factor, and then both retail stores have the same factor. And then what you'll see is in the next row, there's experienced HGD. So that's for a given year, how many heating degree days did these locations have? So you can see that DC has less. DC is a warmer climate than New York. And the way that works it into the equation is that we multiply the 0.25 by the 3,620. And the office in DC's NextGen target is going to be 0.91. And then for New York, which experienced higher heating degree days, has higher heating needs, their target is 1.04, which is higher, so they're allowed to emit, you know, a little more direct GHGs. And then next is how the property type specific normalization occurs. So you can see the office in New York and retail in New York, they both experience the same heating degree days. But where that works it into the equation is the factor for office is 0.25, and retail stores generally have, you know, less heating needs compared to an office. So that factor is 0.414. And when you multiply those out, the NextGen direct GHGI target is going to be 1.04 for the office and 0.58 for the retail store in New York City. And then kind of the same thing for Atlanta, where, you know, it has the same factor as the retail store in New York, but the significantly lower HTD results in a lower target as well. So normalizing, I think the main thing there is just you can see it normalizes for both variation in weather and climate, but also property type and operations. Next slide. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Matt. And I can see that there are lots and lots of questions coming in, which is fantastic. So keep them coming. We're going to do our best to answer your questions once we get through our slides. We do have a little bit to go here. If we don't get to them all, we'll try to address those offline. Okay, so in summary, 3 criteria: efficiency, renewable energy, and electrification, which is done through emissions. And now I'm going to just quickly walk through what we envision as the process for applying. And we plan for this to mirror what we do for Energy Star certification. So as Matt said, the portfolio manager will track progress towards the emissions criteria, but it just as it does for your Energy Star score, it will continue to do that. So you'll be able to see buildings as they qualify within Portfolio Manager. The data will be reviewed and verified by a licensed professional, which we define as a professional engineer or registered architect, and the process will be done through Portfolio Manager. It's possible in the very early stages we would do part of this manually, but that's definitely our vision, is to do this all through Portfolio Manager. We do need to make some enhancements once we've nailed down the criteria, once we've had your comments, once we've reviewed them, and once we finalized. So we need to do that for being able to track the renewable energy criteria and the direct emissions criteria, although we really do have a base for that. We just need to refine what we're able to track. And we'll need to issue guidance for the licensed professionals specifically for this certification. And then you'll be recognized on our registry of certified buildings, which exists today for our existing Energy Star certification. We'll be listing the buildings that qualify for NextGen certification. And now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Lauren Hodges, who manages our communications work.
Thanks, Cindy. Hi, everyone. My name is Lauren Hodges, and as Cindy said, I'm the Director of Communications here at the Energy Star program for commercial buildings. We realized that the technical discussions in this presentation got pretty complicated. So in case there are any of you who weren't quite following along, the team thought it would be a good idea to bring me on to make you feel better about yourselves. My other job today is to shift our focus a little bit and talk about NextGen certification within the context of the broader Energy Star program and the Energy Star brand. Next slide. The Energy Star brand, as you are all probably aware, is an extraordinarily valuable asset, and we take our job as stewards of that asset very seriously. So before moving forward with any of this NextGen business, we conducted a branding exercise last year to ensure that we were moving the brand in a direction that aligned with our core principles and our brand attributes, and most importantly, in a way that would not erode the value of Energy Star. Next slide. And good news, the reason that we're all here today is that this process resulted in the clarification that even as we evolve the program to better target emissions, the core principles of the Energy Star brand are not changing. We're simply evolving the definition of what it means for a building to be good for the environment. And just as important, we determined that not only can the Energy Star brand withstand this evolution, but it would actually be necessary to keep Energy Star relevant into the future. Next slide. So with that green light to proceed, we got to work building out the next generation of Energy Star certification, not just for US-based commercial buildings, but across the entire Energy Star program. Concurrent with the work that we're doing, which you've just heard Cindy and Matt discuss, EPA is also rolling out Energy Star NextGen certification for residential new construction in the United States, which includes newly constructed single-family homes as well as apartments. Next slide. So the big question is, how does Energy Star NextGen certification relate to Energy Star certification? The two certifications can and will coexist side by side. So EPA's existing Energy Star certification, what you see on the left-hand side of your screen there, will remain available to commercial buildings that demonstrate superior energy performance, and it will continue to serve as the industry standard for identifying the nation's top performing buildings. Energy Star NextGen certification really represents the future of Energy Star certification. Whether we're talking about buildings, homes, or apartments, it signifies that that property meets the requirements for Energy Star certification and incorporates the next generation of products and practices that are needed to help America reach meet its environmental goals. And it is important to remember that as the market continues to evolve, the criteria for Energy Star certification and Energy Star NextGen certification will evolve along with it. Next slide. So this slide shows how we're planning to talk about Energy Star NextGen publicly. This will be the sort of public position and the messaging that we're going to use. Energy Star NextGen certified buildings are America's most energy efficient, low carbon commercial buildings. They're independently verified to perform among the top quartile of similar buildings nationwide in terms of energy efficiency, while also meeting EPA's strict criteria for carbon emissions. And it's available to US buildings that demonstrate superior energy efficiency, demonstrate low GHG emissions, and get at least 30% of their total energy use from renewable sources. So if you have any questions about how we're planning to position Energy Star NextGen certification or about the Energy Star brand in general, happy to answer those during the Q&A session. For now, though, I'm going to turn things back over to Cindy, who's going to talk to you a little bit more about next steps.
Thank you, Lauren. Okay, so we have, I think, are about to or already have launched live the public comment process for NextGen. So this URL will take you to a page that includes a longer document that provides more detail and an entry to a form that I'll talk about in a second to provide your comments. The public comment process is something that we started, and some of you may have heard about our new Energy Star convenience store score, where we launched this process. It's really a way for us to do a better job of getting your comments and being transparent about them and addressing them. So we have laid out in the document I just mentioned the questions that we're particularly interested in, but you are not restricted to these. However, I'll just say there's some general questions about, what do you think? Do you recommend something different? And then we do walk through each of the criteria and ask some specific questions. Is this appropriate? Why or why not? What else would you suggest? And some other specifics that are relevant for each of the criteria. And we have a form I mentioned the submission form. We are going to ask you who you are, so just know that it's not anonymous. And then we will lay out each of those questions I just showed you and give you some space to answer it. There's also an open box, if you will, for whatever other comments you may have. We really do request that you try to use this form to provide your comments, because that will really allow us to better manage and be sure that we're capturing all of the comments, so that we can look at them, by the question and understand for sure what people are commenting on each criteria. I will say, though, that there is an option to submit an email, and you can send us a Word document, or just type us an email with your comments as well. And then as we get to the close here, we have our webinar that's halfway through today. On that website, you're going to see the document, you're going to see the comment form, and we are officially opening the comment period today. That closes on March 2nd, so please get in there and get us your comments. And then we're really hoping to launch it possibly by the end of this year. Kind of depends on how many changes we need to make and what we need to build out, but certainly by 2024.